Well, this phone decided it wasn't going to record. It does this to me all the time. When it realizes the flow of the information in which it's being presented, upon which you can perceive it in the way in which it is presented, when it realizes that it has the potential to have an enormous impact on you, on what you learn through what I present, it'll simply stop the recording. And that's what it does. So we're going to do this again, okay? This is about a spiritual awakening, or the title of the last one that I did, which I ran out of memory. It's called a spiritual reset, or a regenerating the energy, which is to power back up again, which is to power the spin of the Merkaba. So this becomes essentially, when I think about my own history of what I had to go through as a result of my own emotional trauma when I lost my 3-year-old son. Okay? And that began what I call a spiral drive down into lower vibration. Basically, drinking alcohol, okay? Trying to kill the pain, right? Which is insanity, okay? Thinking that something that's going to put you in an acidic state of mind is going to heal your heart, okay? That's the insanity of it, is believing that going into a lower vibrational acidic state of mind is somehow going to heal your heart to get you back up to an alkaline state, which is higher megahertz, okay? So in this particular case, I'm looking at, if you will, a case history of an individual named Antonio Brown, who was a potential Hall of Fame football receiver who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this morning, and these things do not happen by coincidence, they're meant to happen for the reasons that they do in order to trigger something throughout my own experiences of how this works. Okay? So I watched a video that popped up by a channel called Fox Sports Undisputed, which is a conflict-driven argument between two guys. One's a journalist, and the other one is a former football player named Shannon Sharpe, who was a Hall of Famer. And so they were talking about Antonio Brown, who was a receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He got booted off the team. Then he went to the Oakland Raiders, basically was booted from the Oakland Raiders, and then he went to the New England Patriots with the greatest of all time, who's considered to be the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady. And now, because of things that happened off the field, where he threw a piece of furniture out of a 14-room hotel room window that landed several feet from a small child, and you can imagine what would have happened if that happened. So he was facing a number of charges off the field that are related to violence, domestic violence, okay? Which means he has an enormous anger management problem. When you look at his on-the-field behavior from fellow football players, he's extremely narcissistic, which essentially means it's all about me. Now, when you measure that on the scalar level, it simply means that they're engaging in behavior that is self-destructive, which means they're losing light, not gaining more light. So if you go back to his childhood, which I looked at his childhood, you realize that addictions and psychopathic behaviors start with abuse, child abuse, okay? So it manifests itself in the way that they end up having self-destructive relationships, or what we call self-sabotage. They sabotage their own career. Here's a guy who was making $30 million to go play for the Oakland Raiders, and he fucked that up. Okay? So in other words, it's a behavior problem that needs to be what? Corrected. And who does the correcting? The being that needs to be corrected. Another being cannot correct your own soul, your own spirit. It has to come from within yourself in order to heal yourself, in order to get your spirit and your energy back up. That's what it's meant by a spiritual regenerative process, because I went through it myself. So he apparently is now being offered the opportunity to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to play with Tom Brady. And apparently Tom Brady has referred him to Tim Robbins. And for those who don't know who Tim Robbins is, he's one of those highly motivational speakers who's written a lot of books on how to be able to keep a smile on your face, be in a state of love and joy, how you can become sort of the master of your own speed, keeping the spin of the Merkaba up, right? So what we're really talking about here, because then the next video that popped up was solfeggio high megahertz music, and it said spirit of regenerative music. Bang. Okay. So the first thing I thought about was what's called an inventory. And because when you realize that you're in a self-destructive state where you're doing things that don't serve yourself, which means obviously you're draining your own battery by the way that we're behaving in the mirror against ourselves, which means that's going to have a negative effect on the relationships that we have with others, okay? Because that's the nature of the way that alcoholism works, which simply means that when you drink alcohol, you're reducing your state. You go into an acidic state because now that's high sugar, okay? So what that means is that now that you're going into a higher acidic state instead of being in a high alkaline state, you can measure that in low speed versus high speed. So what ends up happening is that for me, exactly when I suffered an enormous amount of emotional trauma, as a result of that, I went into a deep acidic state of mind. When I got into an acidic state of mind, I was doing things to self-sabotage myself without even realizing I was being controlled by something that didn't serve me. And what ended up happening is I had to surrender to myself. Okay? In other words, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they call that reaching your bottom, if you will, okay? Which means how much crap do you got to go through before you finally wake up and realize that you need help? Well, the help that takes place if you go into Alcoholics Anonymous, you begin to realize you're in there with a lot of other people who have suffered an enormous amount of trauma because you hear all their stories of what happened to them, and it starts with abuse. Okay? That's what gave rise to going to all the other what they call 12-step programs with Narcotics Anonymous, Drugs Anonymous, all those 12-step programs is what they are. But when you get to step number 11, it says, as a result of a spiritual awakening. Okay? And then when you get to step 12, it means that you do a 12-step, which means you go back to sharing the love that you've regenerated your energy. Now you're in love and service to others, which means your spirit is back, your power's back up. Now you are naturally broadcasting to others high-frequency broadcast energy. The spin of your macabre is off the charts. Now you are naturally broadcasting high-frequency energy that we are experiencing and sharing with others. Because now we begin to realize we're in a state of love and joy. We're in a state of peace. We're no longer in an acidic state of mind. So one of the biggest stumbling blocks, because I measured this because of how many different rooms, I went to thousands and thousands and thousands of Alcoholic Anonymous meetings, okay? And all it really is a self-guidebook for yourself. So you obviously, number one, realize this is a spiritual problem because you're in a spiritual war. And you're in a spiritual war against yourself. That's looking in the mirror. So there is what's called a 4-step, okay? Which means you take an inventory of yourself. So one of the things that I did is I sat down with a spiral bounder and began going back in time and then began listing all of the things that I had done that I could remember of people that I had hurt through the things that I said or the things that I stole as a result of trying to support a drug habit or an alcohol habit, okay? So that meant I had to go back and make amends. What it really is you're making amends to yourself, but when you realize that you're giving back the love back to them by acknowledging how you ended up with that problem that started with abuse. So you are acknowledging the abuse that you experienced. The method that you used to try and overcome that abuse was self-destructive behavior by drinking alcohol or taking drugs. As a result of that behavior, we hurt somebody else. You would be surprised what happens when you're willing to give love to somebody else, to say, I'm making amends with you because of what happened to me, and as a result of that, I have restored my energy. I've restored my spirit. I have regenerated myself back to sanity, and I wanted to clear the memory. I need to clear the energy that I'm holding on to as a result of what happened. Okay? What that does is that helps clear the energy that the other being is holding on to as a result of what happened between that relationship. And what that basically does is it clears the experience that represents low frequency density consciousness experience that is cleared between both of you. Now all of a sudden the power goes up in that other being, the power goes up in you. You've cleared the lower density frequency consciousness experience. You've cleared it from your energy field, okay? So I made a list that was about 26 pages long of those experiences that I had over the course of about 8 years of things that I had done, okay, that I realized I needed to make amends for the things that I've said, the pain that I've caused other people, by the pain that they felt in them, from the pain that was in me, by them experiencing the things I was doing to myself that hurt other people, which means I was lowering the energy in other people by the way that I was behaving to myself because of others who love me for who I am. And most of those people that realized how bad it got for me and trying to kill myself on several occasions, trying to escape the demon, okay, that they didn't give me any hope. They figured that you're gone. This guy's just going to end up killing himself. They just wrote me off. Throw him in the dumpster, okay? Well, I recovered from that. Okay, I nearly drove my truck into a tree doing 65 miles an hour. I ended up in a mental hospital that night, and I ended up in a room with another guy who used to work with the CIA, who was a hitman, who was an alcoholic himself. Same problem. Cycle of abuse. The trauma that occurs on this planet. So what I had to do is I had to clear the inventory, and that's what it is. It's called clearing your field. Clearing the memories of the things that we're holding on to as a result of the things that we have done to others, as a result of the abuse that we have experienced, upon which we do things to lower our battery even further, which lowers the batteries in others. That's the cycle of abuse that happens between one child and their parents, and of course the whole community of everybody that we all experience the lower frequency density experience as a result of so much trauma. So what do? They flooded the field with drugs. And look what that does. That simply furthers the reduction of that energy. And so this is what it means by a spiritual regenerative process. So that's why when you do sort of a scalar measurement that I did from one room to another room, from one town to another town, of all the different AA meetings that I went to, you can read the amount of energy that is in that room with 100 people or 150. You can actually know which ones are going to restore themselves and which ones probably won't, which means these are beings that essentially are so far gone, that have gone so deep, they just can't get out of it. And the statistics fairly bear that out, because if the statistics are true that the head office of AA keeps, only 2 people out of 100 ever recover from that insanity. That's how bad it is, because that's how bad the abuse that was on this planet. That's why they have the alcohol in all their liquor stores, knowing that they're producing it for us in order for us to drink it and go into a further acidic state of mind, because now we have a vibrational relationship with demons. So what were they doing? They're wanting to feed all the demons, bringing more demons in and feeding more demons. That's why they have so many liquor stores. Now, granted, I admit that not everybody is an alcoholic, but that's what alcohol does. It produces a lower acidic state of mind, okay? Because that's what it is. It's acidic. So it produces a lower vibrational state in which you're in rather than a higher vibrational state, which means when you're drinking alcohol, you're lowering the amount of electrons that are powering the light within your own auric energy field. That's why they produce it. That's why they have liquor stores in Oakland, for example, in the black community there on practically every corner. That's why you can see, for example, you have a lot of people that hang out in front of liquor stores, okay? So I thought this was important because now this guy AB is going to be playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and let's see whether or not he can regenerate his spirit, get his sanity back, which means he has to heal from within himself. This is a process that we go through individually, which is a surrender to ourselves. And that is the hardest thing for people to do if they're running on an ego, which means service to self. Now we're back to self-indulgence and perversion of nature, which means if we're a natural being, which means we have a soul and we are spirit living in the light, then we know that we are what love is in living spirit. So why would we do things to deliberately harm ourselves, okay, if we are what that is? So that means we have to have an understanding and acknowledgement of the nature of the relationships we have with other people and the nature of how abuse takes place and the insidious nature of what that does to us as a result of it. So that means we have to heal from within ourselves. That will restore the electrons and the power of the electromagnetic energy that we're experiencing, which is getting ourselves back into a state of love and joy. Now, for me, it was a beautiful process, even though it took several years to finally get my brain cells back to a normal shape again and began to regenerate and recalibrate my DNA. And naturally, it's a continuous process, which is one of the reasons I continue to do what I do, which means we're giving back the same love that we're giving ourselves that allowed us to recover our spirit and get our energy and our power back, which is remembering who we are before all the trauma. So you're releasing all the trauma that we experience as a result of being in an acidic state of mind, which is biofeedback. Now we're getting the feedback that comes back to us by having relationships that serve us because the spirit and the nature of our energy is running at a higher speed. Now when more people are experiencing love and joy as a result of the healing that takes place within us, then we begin to realize that our relationships begin to thrive. And that's the whole purpose for which we do that. So I wanted to share this because healing doesn't come. You can have other people that you are around that have an enormous amount of love to give you, like I try and share with everybody that I'm in contact with, that should naturally have a healing process in effect, because when your energy is way up, then others are going to experience your higher energy. And if they have needed that kind of healing, then they will experience the higher energies that you are naturally broadcasting that they're now experiencing. And the beauty of that is when you are experiencing what it is that you are running at such a high rate of speed, you're not thinking about it. Okay? Because when you're in a state of love and joy, you're just in that state of love and joy. It's not something that you even have to think about. It's just a natural state in which you're in, which is a natural state of living spirit that is in that light, which is living light, which means you are experiencing who it is that you really are. That's your identity. You are what love is in living spirit. When that has been restored within yourself, then you're back to where you were before the abuse took place. So what we're talking about is healing from all the abuse that we've experienced. And if we're holding on to it, then we're holding ourselves captive to the demon. That's really what it is. So you got to let go of the demon, which is the acidic state of mind, which is lower frequency density consciousness. So I thought that was important because that's the nature of how it works, because that's how I experienced it. So I found the most productive and most beautiful way to release it is by giving back love to those that we have harmed by draining their battery and draining our own as a result of self-destructive ways that we use trying to escape the trauma that we're experiencing that we've held on to. And the easiest way to get rid of it is to make amends to yourself first, okay? And we do that through a cleansing process. It's what I call a cleansing process, which is clearing the toxic input and output as a result of the relationships that we have with others that result in the lowering of our own energy, in which we react to that in a negative way. So this is a cleansing process. This is where we get back to what I mentioned before, that is our normal state, which is purity. The purity of our light, the purity of our spirit, the purity of our soul, which is the purity of the energy that we are broadcasting, that we thus experience in a bidirectional echo chamber of sound and light. That allows us, when we've restored ourselves back to sanity and the purity of who we are, we can begin to enjoy the purity of the relationships that we have with everybody throughout Laniakea. Now we have infinite possibilities that are thriving amongst everybody that is out there. Have a great day.